The question rises in the dark like a whisper carved from cold iron, echoing through a place where memories die and identities dissolve. It is not asked aloud. It blooms inside the mind, quiet, suffocating, unavoidable. Before the listener can answer, the weight of the universe presses down, reminding them that in the grim and unending shadow of the 41st millennium, survival itself is a crime paid for in blood, sanity, and silence. Here, where hope is little more than a rumor whispered by the dying, the question becomes something far more terrible. Not would you surrender yourself, but could you endure what comes after? For in the darkness beyond the Imperium's crumbling borders, there are warriors molded from agony and baptized in fear, men forged into instruments that even the Emperor himself might hesitate to wield. They are the Grey Knights, the Imperium's final whisper, the hidden blade pressed against the throat of the demonic. They are called pure, flawless, untouchable, champions who stand unbroken before the warp. But purity has a price, and perfection is a wound that never heals. Behind every shining plate of silver armor lies a story carved from torment, ritual, and sacrifice. A life unmade and rebuilt not by choice, but by cosmic necessity. A Grey Knight is not born, he is stripped, scorched, reshaped, and hollowed until nothing remains but duty bound in human skin. Those who survive the process, if survival is the right word, emerge as something less than human, yet something greater than mortal. But before that transformation, there is the moment of truth. The moment of ending disguised as a beginning. Our story begins with a single soul dragged to the edge of oblivion, a man whose name, once held with pride, has already begun to wither from memory. He does not remember who he was, not truly, not deeply. Only flashes remain. Laughter dissolving into static, warmth fading into frost, faces dissolving like sand under a rising tide of psychic fire. The past is dying, eaten away by rituals he does not understand. But the future stretches before him like a blade, cold, sharp, merciless. He feels it pressing into his mind even now, shaping him, defining him, erasing him. And somewhere deep within, he wonders whether the horrors he has glimpsed in nightmares are warnings, or promises. He stands on the threshold of transformation, but he does not know what awaits him on the other side. He has been told that he will become a protector of mankind, a shield against the impossible nightmares that feast upon humanity's despair. But the tone of those who speak such words carries no pride, only grim acceptance. Because the truth is far simpler and far more disturbing. To walk the path of a Grey Knight is to embrace a life that can only end in death, madness, or erasure. A life where every victory is a lie told to conceal the cost, and every triumph hides the bodies of those who stood before you and failed. A life where suffering is not the exception, but the foundation. And yet, something stirs within him. A shiver that is not fear, not doubt, but recognition, like the faint echo of a forgotten truth scratching at the inside of his skull. He cannot name it, cannot grasp it, but it lingers like a bruise on the soul. It is the first whisper, faint but unmistakable, of a destiny intertwined with horrors he cannot yet imagine. For the path he is about to walk will lead him into the jaws of the warp itself, into battles where reality trembles and sanity dissolves. It will drag him into a confrontation with forces older than time and hungrier than death. And before this story ends, he will discover that true purity is not an absence of corruption, but the courage to face the darkness even as it tries to claw its way inside. This is the beginning, the breath before the plunge, the last heartbeat of the man he once was. And when it ends, when the final shape of his existence is carved by fire and shadow, only one question will matter. Was he chosen, or condemned? The question doesn't just hang in the air, it sinks, like a weight tied to the chest, dragging breath and certainty with it. Before answering, before even understanding, you feel it, the quiet terror of imagining a life where your memories are not taken by time, but ripped away by force. And as this story deepens, as the truth sharpens like a blade, know this, if you stay until the end, you'll unlock a perspective on the Grey Knights that only a few ever dare to explore. A reward not of facts or lore, but of understanding the suffering behind the silver armor. Because to become a Grey Knight is not to ascend. It is to be unmade. There is no ceremony, no gentle transition, no whispered promise of rebirth. There is only a room that smells of cold stone and burning incense, and the shuddering psychic pressure of power that feels older than humanity itself. The man, the one who was someone, who once had a mother, a home, a heartbeat tied to another person's, stands at the center of the chamber as the first ritual begins. Not one of blessing, but of erasure. The librarians gather around him, their minds pressing against his like a tide of sharpened thoughts. And in that crushing silence, identity begins to fracture. His memories don't fade softly. They shatter. A childhood laugh melts into a smear of light. A familiar face twists, dissolving into static. A name, his name, breaks into dust. Every piece of the life he once lived is torn free, not because he is unworthy, but because he must be emptied. The warp feeds on memory, on fear, on desire. So the Grey Knights purge not just weakness, but humanity itself. They burn it out like infection. They carve it away like rot. And through that agony, the man feels something horrifying. The realization that losing someone through death is grief, but losing someone through forced forgetting is a death that never ends. The body trembles. The mind screams. The soul cracks. But no one moves to comfort him. No one lifts a hand. Tears are a luxury he can no longer afford. Because a Grey Knight cannot have a past. A past can be corrupted. A past can be used. A past can break you. What emerges from these rituals is not a warrior yet. Not even a shell. It is something raw, a hollowed space waiting to be filled with purpose, discipline, and pain. And in that fragile emptiness, a truth settles like ash. To protect humanity, he must first cease being human. This is the first step. The quiet horror. The unseen sacrifice. There is a silence that follows the erasure of the self, not peaceful, not gentle, but hollow. The kind of silence that settles in the mind like dust in an abandoned cathedral, where echoes no longer belong to what once was but to what has yet to take shape. The newly emptied soul, stripped of its story and identity, now stands on the threshold of a path that few have walked and none have survived unchanged. And in that stillness, something stirs. It begins subtly, a faint tremor at the edge of perception, a vibration too delicate to claim the name of a voice, yet too intentional to be dismissed as imagination. The initiate tries to ignore it, believing it merely a remnant of the tearing ritual, a phantom impression left behind by memories violently uprooted. But the sensation persists, threading itself through the quiet corners of his mind like smoke slipping under a sealed door. A feeling grows, a presence more than a sound. Not warm, not familiar, but awake. During training, when psychic drills push him to the brink of collapse, the whisper grows clearer. Not words, not thoughts. Something more primal, like a pulse reverberating through the marrow of his being. At first, he convinces himself that it must be the lingering imprint of the librarian's psychic grip during the rites. A scar in the soul, perhaps, or a fracture still mending. Yet when the instructors step away and the chamber lies still, the whisper does not fade with their absence. It follows him into meditation chambers, coiling around his attempts at discipline. It curls beneath the surface of his thoughts as he spars, reflecting emotions he doesn't feel. It lingers at the edge of every dream, like an unseen hand brushing against the fabric of his mind. In the rare moments when he dares to acknowledge it, a cold dread settles in his chest, a fear deeper than any physical pain, the fear that something survived the purge of his identity, something that should not exist within a Grey Knight. He tries to push it away. He recites mantras of purity until his throat runs dry. He forces focus through gritted teeth until sweat burns his eyes. But the whisper is patient, unhurried, watching, and worse, learning. It changes each time he resists, adapting like a predator studying its prey. What terrifies him most is not the presence itself, but the impossible truth forming slowly before him. This whisper does not come from him. It does not belong to the librarians. It does not echo from memory. It comes from beyond, from the warp, from something that has noticed him. Yet he remains silent, because Grey Knights are purged at the first sign of corruption. Because doubt is death. Because impurity is eradicated without hesitation. So he hides the truth behind a mask of obedience, hoping that whatever lurks inside him is nothing more than an echo, a harmless residue. But in the deepest corners of his mind, the whisper curls like a serpent preparing to strike, quiet, watchful, patient. And though he cannot yet understand its intent, one thing becomes painfully clear. The warp has seen him. And it does not forget. There comes a point in Grey Knight training when silence becomes more dangerous than the drills, and stillness feels heavier than armor. As the days bleed together in unbroken cycles of psychic purging, physical torment, and emotional suppression, the initiate begins to notice things, not within himself, but around him. Veterans walk the halls with a gravity that cannot be taught, their footsteps quiet not from discipline but from exhaustion. Their eyes seem distant, as though they carry entire wars behind them, wars no one will ever know they fought. And every so often, in those brief glances, the initiate sees something raw, something stripped of all pretense, fear disguised as acceptance. It begins with small warnings, subtle and easy to dismiss. A veteran murmurs a phrase while passing him in a dim corridor, hope is noise. Silence is truth. Another brushes past during weapons drill and mutters, you'll scream without sound before the end. These are not threats, not lessons. They are confessions, but spoken with voices too weary to tremble. None look him in the eye when they say such things. None slow down, none explain, and that is when the dread begins to spread. The instructors never speak of life outside the fortress. They never hint at a future beyond service. Everything they teach points toward one truth: survival is not expected, only obedience. When the initiate witnesses a fellow recruit collapse during psychic isolation, his body convulsing, his mind fracturing under invisible pressure, the Justicar's response is chillingly simple: if he cannot endure the trials, he cannot endure the war. The fallen recruit is removed, silent and still, and no one sees him again. No eulogy, no farewell, only an empty cot where a living soul once struggled to become more. Days pass, weeks blur, and patterns emerge, grim, undeniable patterns. Those who show fear vanish. Those who hesitate disappear. Those who question, simply cease to exist. Purity, he learns, is not a virtue. It is a weapon, and it cuts as deeply into the Grey Knights themselves as it does into their enemies. Yet the veterans' warnings linger far longer than the lessons. One night, after a brutal psychic ordeal that leaves him shivering on cold stone, a scarred warrior kneels beside him. The veteran's voice is barely above a whisper, but every word is carved with pain. There is no life for us. Only war, only duty, only the long march into shadows that swallow all but the strongest minds. The man pauses, his eyes haunted by memories the initiate will never know. You will learn that the worst battles are the ones fought inside your own skull. The initiate wants to ask what he means, but the veteran is already rising to leave. Before he disappears into the corridor, he speaks one final sentence, the sentence that lodges itself in the initiate's mind like a nail of ice. The warp watches you. I can feel it. I only hope you are strong enough when it finally reaches for you. It is the first time someone acknowledges the invisible presence he has been hiding. The first time another voice echoes the dread he carries alone. The first sign that whatever stirs within him is not imagined, but sensed. And with those words, an unspoken truth settles in his chest with the weight of a doomed prophecy. Some Grey Knights fall not in battle, not by demon claws, not by fire or blade, but by the horrors growing quietly inside their own minds. The darkness ahead does not approach. It waits. And now, the initiate knows he walks toward it with no promise of return. There is no day or night on Titan, not for the recruits. Time is measured not by the rising of a sun but by the tightening of pressure around the mind, the shocks of psychic force, the burn of ritual flame, and the taste of metallic air heavy with incense and fear. Yet there are moments, rare and unsettling, when the training halls fall unnaturally still, and the fortress monastery seems to hold its breath. Those are the moments when the sky outside, if it can be called a sky, turns into a vast, lightless canvas. A moonless void that feels less like a backdrop and more like an eye watching from the beyond. It is during these hours that indoctrination truly begins. The recruits are marched into the open courtyards where frigid winds cut through flesh and bone like invisible blades. The ground beneath their feet hums with psychic energy, as if Titan itself is whispering ancient warnings. The air smells of ozone and old stone, and every breath feels like inhaling the memory of 1,000 forgotten battles. The instructors speak little. They simply form a circle and let the silence weigh on the recruits until the pressure becomes unbearable. Then the trials begin. Psychic torments tear into their minds like talons. Illusions crafted by librarians force them to confront horrors shaped from their deepest fears. Some see their own bodies dissolving into warp light. Others see demonic forms reaching for them, speaking their names in voices too distorted to be human. The initiate, hollowed and stripped of identity, experiences something far worse. He sees nothing at all. No visions, no illusions, only an endless black void stretching infinitely before him, a darkness so complete that even the concept of fear feels swallowed whole. And that emptiness feels familiar. It pulses faintly, echoing the same rhythm as the whisper coiled deep inside his mind. When the instructors break the illusion, several recruits collapse. A few scream. One is dragged away, twitching violently as blood trickles from his eyes. But the initiate stands silent, staring into the cold emptiness where the vision once was. He cannot shake the feeling that something, or someone, was staring back at him. The next trial comes without warning. The recruits are ordered to kneel in perfect formation while psychic storms coil above them like spectral serpents. Thunder cracks without sound. Lightning flickers without light. The warp bleeds subtly into reality, testing their mental fortitude. For hours, the storm rages, and the recruits must hold absolute discipline. No movement, no flinch, no emotion. But as the minutes stretch into agony, the initiate begins to hear it again. That faint, impossible whisper threading through the storm like a secret carried on invisible wind. Soft, careful, intentional, almost amused. It slides along the surface of his thoughts, tasting them, probing them. And when a bolt of psychic lightning slams into the recruit's formation, he feels the whisper brush against the edge of his consciousness, as if shielding him, curious about his endurance. He knows he should report this. He knows impurity is death. He knows the slightest warp taint is reason for execution. But something instinctive keeps him silent. Something ancient. Something hungry. By the time the storm ends, several recruits lie unconscious on the ground. Others shake uncontrollably, their minds frayed to threads. The initiate remains still, breathing heavily but unbroken. Yet inside him, the truth trembles like a secret too dangerous to name. Whatever watches him, whatever whispers to him, is growing stronger. And perhaps, in some quiet and forbidden corner of his hollowed soul, he fears something far more than corruption. He fears that this presence isn't trying to destroy him. He fears it is trying to understand him. And understanding is the first step toward claiming. There comes a point in Grey Knight training where fear becomes almost a tangible substance, thick as smoke and cold as steel. The initiate has faced exhaustion, psychic storms, and the endless erasure of self, yet nothing prepares him for the chamber of truth. It is whispered among the veterans, though never openly discussed, that no trial tests the body more than it tests the mind, and no mind survives untouched. To enter the chamber is to confront the deepest, most hidden corners of one's own being, stripped bare and examined under the lens of eternity. He steps forward, hollow and obedient, yet something twists uneasily inside him, a subtle resistance he cannot name. The chamber waits, a vast, silent space where light bends unnaturally and shadows curve as if breathing. The air carries no warmth. The stone underfoot seems to vibrate with the weight of uncountable souls long since lost to its purpose. The initiate knows the trial will manifest his fears, his sins, the fragments of the self that survived erasure, but he also suspects something more. Something uniquely attuned to him, already stirring before the ritual begins. The process is subtle at first. A whispering sensation in his skull, like wind slipping through hollow corridors. Shapes emerge at the edge of his vision, half-formed and flickering, never quite solid. For others, the chamber produces clear, direct nightmares, the death of loved ones, failure, betrayal. For him, the fear is less tangible. It is recognition, a presence that does not belong, one that watches, one that waits, and one that seems to know something about him no one else does. The librarians guide him through the ritual, their voices calm but unyielding, like steel threading through ice. Face yourself. Admit your weakness. Embrace the truth. The initiate does not understand fully, but he obeys. And as he focuses, the chamber bends his mind inward, unspooling thought and memory until all that remains is the echo of an empty shell. Then, the unexpected happens. His fear manifests, not in a vision of dying or failure, but as something alive. A being formed from the shadows within himself, yet impossibly alien. It is sharp, intelligent, aware. And it whispers his name in tones he cannot forget. The librarians pause, sensing the anomaly. They exchange glances, brief and silent. Even the veterans hesitate. For the first time, the initiate feels a sliver of power not granted by training, not forged by ritual. Something innate, something forbidden. And with that power comes comprehension. Whatever stirs inside him is not merely a reaction to the trial. It is a force separate, ancient, and curious. The chamber does not destroy it. It reveals it. It marks him. Hours pass, or perhaps days, for time becomes meaningless in the chamber of truth. He confronts every terror, the erasure of identity, the solitude of obedience, the inevitability of death. Yet always, the presence lingers, threading through his consciousness like a faint pulse of light in the void. And when the trial ends, when the librarians allow him to leave, the initiate knows the truth he must hide. He has glimpsed something he cannot name, something the chapter cannot see, something that may one day see him. And in that realization, a single, unspoken question rises to the surface of his hollowed mind. If what lives inside him is not meant to be, can he truly survive the destiny that awaits? Every lesson in this stage of training drives the point home. Weakness is intolerable, doubt is fatal, and any deviation from perfection is punished immediately, sometimes quietly, sometimes without warning. The initiate learns that mercy is a lie, compassion is a luxury, and fear is an enemy that must be eradicated before it can take root. The instructors do not tolerate hesitation. They do not allow reflection. They allow only obedience, and the weight of that expectation presses on the mind like a warp storm, invisible but undeniable. He witnesses the consequences firsthand. A recruit falters during combat drills and is set aside, never spoken of again. Another, overwhelmed by visions too powerful to contain, screams until the librarians themselves intervene, purging what remains of his mind to prevent corruption from spreading. The initiate internalizes each lesson through observation, fear, and personal trial, realizing that survival is measured not by heroism but by the ability to endure an existence that is almost beyond comprehension. Every day of training erodes the remnants of humanity, leaving behind something cold, sharp, and unfeeling. Yet paradoxically, it is this very erosion that grants the Grey Knights the power to face the demonic. Purity, he learns, is not about being untainted. It is about being ready to sacrifice everything, including the self, to contain corruption. Pain is not only inevitable, it is instructive. Pain teaches discipline. Pain teaches control. Pain teaches the fine line between dominance and annihilation. The initiate begins to understand the true meaning of damnation. It is not death, but being trapped in a mind unprepared to confront what is coming. Those who are unready do not simply perish, they are consumed, twisted into instruments of the very darkness they sought to destroy. In these hours, the initiate also begins to grasp the unspoken rules of his new existence. Trust is limited to the brotherhood, but even there, it is conditional. Loyalty is unquestionable, but the consequences of failure are absolute. The veterans, the librarians, the justicars, all of them carry the weight of this knowledge, a burden visible in the haunted set of their shoulders and the cold precision of their actions. And he, the newly hollowed soul, begins to see that his own whispered presence, the faint, impossible voice lurking at the edges of his mind, is a variable that cannot be measured, predicted, or controlled. It is during this stage that he realizes the most terrifying truth of all. The path of the Grey Knight is not a shield against chaos, it is a mirror. The demons of the warp are reflected not just in the enemies he will face, but in the darkness within himself. Every act of courage, every measured strike, every sacrifice of the self is a battle with the unseen forces growing inside him. To master the outer world, he must first survive the inner one. To walk the path of purity is to walk a razor's edge between salvation and annihilation. And somewhere deep beneath the ritual, the drills, and the relentless lessons, a thought flickers, fragile, dangerous, and unacknowledged. If survival is measured by the destruction of one's own humanity, what remains when the self is finally gone? He is introduced to his fellow recruits and veterans, each a mirror of his own hollowed state yet carrying unique scars of mind, body, and spirit. One is quiet, disciplined to the point of near inhumanity, a veteran who never speaks unless absolutely necessary, but whose actions silently shield those around him. Another is brash, testing limits, daring the darkness to claim him, yet teetering constantly on the edge of psychological collapse. And there is the justicar, a figure of absolute control and judgment, whose gaze seems to measure not only skill but the very essence of a soul. These are not companions in the conventional sense, they are lifelines, the only anchors in a storm of psychic pressure and endless ritualized torment. The initiate learns that survival depends as much on understanding the strength of others as it does on mastering himself. Each drill, each trial, is a test not just of individual endurance, but of cohesion under unimaginable stress. During psychic training, when illusions twist reality and warp whispers gnaw at reason, the only thing keeping him grounded is the presence of those around him. Yet even here, the lessons are brutal. Hesitation or failure in one can imperil all. Brotherhood is both shield and weapon. A misstep could unravel the delicate equilibrium of the group, exposing them all to death, or worse, to corruption. In the silent hours, when the recruits collapse into exhaustion on stone floors, the bonds are deepened not through comfort but through shared recognition of their collective suffering. They speak little, for words are fragile and dangerous. Instead, understanding passes through glances, through subtle movements, through the recognition that every heartbeat in the fortress is a victory over forces that seek to unmake them. And in these moments, the initiate glimpses the paradox of the Grey Knights. They are utterly alone, yet bound to one another in a chain stronger than any steel or psychic barrier. The veteran mentor, observing the initiate, imparts lessons that are harsh yet revealing. There is no life for a Grey Knight outside the Brotherhood, he says, his voice calm but carrying the weight of decades of hidden pain. Trust each other, not because you like it, not because it is comfortable, but because if you fail alone, none of you survive. The words linger in the initiate's mind, echoing in the quiet moments between drills, embedding themselves as a principle far more vital than any weapon or ritual. Survival is shared, and unity is forged in suffering. Yet even as he learns this, the whisper at the edges of his mind grows stronger. It is patient, watching, waiting, like a predator learning the movements of its prey. He senses that while the Brotherhood may keep him grounded in the physical world, it cannot shield him from the horrors lurking within or beyond the veil. And so the initiate begins to understand the duality of his existence. Trust the living, yes, but fear the unseen, fear the inner shadow, fear the force that has already noticed him. In the crucible of shared agony, the initiate's understanding of brotherhood takes root. It is not about companionship. It is survival. It is discipline. It is an unspoken pact with others whose pain is equal to your own, whose strength is essential for your endurance, and whose absence could mean the unraveling of all you have endured. It is a bond born not of comfort, but necessity, and it is the only shield a Grey Knight can carry into the coming darkness. The message is succinct, unyielding. A planet in the segmentum obscurus is overrun by forces the Imperium cannot contain. Imperial forces have failed. Demonic activity is accelerating. Entire cities have fallen. Civilian casualties are catastrophic. And in the margins of the dispatch, almost as an afterthought, a single line reads, "Grey Knights deployed." End result non-negotiable. There is no encouragement, no hope, only duty and the absolute certainty that failure is death, or worse. As he prepares, the initiate feels the weight of his armor more heavily than before. Not because it is cumbersome, but because it is a reminder of what he carries within himself: the training, the purity, the agony, and the whisper. Every plate of silver, every rune etched into ceramite, feels like a tether to the expectations of a chapter that demands perfection without question. Yet the whisper stirs now more actively, weaving through his consciousness with curiosity rather than menace. It knows something. It senses the path he is about to walk, and it waits. Departure is swift. The fortress monastery does not linger on farewells, for there is no place for sentiment. Among the Grey Knights, even the veterans, bound by duty and survival, cannot soften the finality of leaving. The initiate feels the weight of their unspoken approval and their shared knowledge of what is to come. The battlefield will not be forgiving. It will offer no mercy, no reprieve, no second chance. And as the vessel pierces the void, leaving the moonless surface of Titan behind, the initiate understands that the horizon ahead is not merely a planet, but a threshold into hell itself. The summons carries with it an unspoken warning: those who step into the warp-tainted world will not return unchanged. And in his mind, the echo of the whisper grows sharper, as if confirming an unvoiced fear, that this war is different. That something in the darkness ahead has already noticed him. And that when he confronts it, the choice will not be whether he survives, but whether his soul survives. Every heartbeat now carries the weight of destiny. Every breath is a reminder that the abyss is not waiting, it is already reaching for him. The Grey Knight knows that in this battle, there will be no victories without cost, no triumphs without torment. And the initiate, hollowed yet unbroken, feels for the first time the true nature of his calling: to stand against a darkness that seeks not merely to destroy, but to claim. The initiate senses immediately that this is no ordinary battlefield. The psychic imprint of suffering saturates every inch of the planet. It clings to stone and steel alike, vibrating faintly in the mind, resonating with something dormant within him. Every breath tastes of ash and iron, every shadow seems to slither with intent. Here, life has already been extinguished, not by the conventional tools of war, but by a subtle, lingering corruption that devours hope before it can take root. Even the veterans move cautiously, aware that the true enemy is not always visible, and that the planet itself is part of the threat. As the squad disembarks, the silence is palpable, a living presence pressing against them. Buildings are warped and twisted, some melted as if by impossible heat, others stained with symbols that burn the eye and itch at the mind. The initiate notices the faint whispers beneath the ruins, voices speaking in tongues that should not exist, yet almost understandable, almost familiar. His pulse quickens, not from fear of battle, but from recognition that the world itself is listening, evaluating, shaping itself around the presence of the Grey Knights. He feels the whisper inside him stir again, sharper now, almost anticipatory, as if aware that the trials to come will be unlike any faced before. The first step onto the soil is heavy, each movement calculated, every breath measured. The squad spreads cautiously, knowing instinctively that the corrupted ground is alive in ways no conventional army could survive. The initiate walks beside his mentor, absorbing the unspoken lessons of vigilance, precision, and controlled fear. And yet, even in this silent march over a dead world, the weight of foreboding grows. This is no battlefield that can be mastered with steel alone. Here, the Grey Knights must fight not just demons and traitors, but the very essence of corruption itself. And somewhere in the dark, the initiate senses the first tendrils of what will become the most horrifying confrontation of his life. As the planet's shadows lengthen, and the winds carry faint cries from the hollowed cities, he realizes that this world is not merely dying. It is already a tomb, a crucible, and a mirror of what might become of anyone who stands against the warp unprepared. And deep within, the whispering force inside him pulses with anticipation, a subtle yet undeniable certainty. This is only the beginning. It emerges suddenly, as if drawn by the psychic signature he cannot yet name. The demon is unlike anything recorded in codexes or whispered among veterans. Its form defies geometry, coiling and folding in ways that should be impossible, its eyes, if they can be called that, shimmering with intelligence and malice. A cold awareness meets the initiate, as though the creature recognizes not only the body but the hollowed core within. For a moment, the world feels unreal, as if time has paused to allow recognition between predator and prey. And then the instinctive terror strikes, a recognition older than training, older than loyalty. This is what the Grey Knights exist to confront, yet this confrontation feels personal. In that instant, the whisper inside his mind surges, no longer faint or patient, but urgent. It coils around the edge of his thoughts, pulsing with energy he does not fully understand. And in the primal clarity of the moment, he realizes that it is not the demon alone he faces, it is the collision of something external with something already living within him. As the creature lunges, his body reacts before his mind does, a flash of psychic power erupting uncontrollably, shielding him, striking the demon back, and buying a momentary reprieve. The other Grey Knights react with precision, their weapons flaring with silver light and purifying fire, striking at the creature with a deadly efficiency honed through centuries. Yet all recognize, without a word, that this is different. The initiate has done what few could, and survived, even as his own psychic core thrums with the echo of something far beyond comprehension. Victory comes, but it is hollow. The demon is banished, but not destroyed, its essence lingers, a stain in the warp that scratches at the edges of reality. The squad acknowledges the event with measured nods, but the initiate knows that something has changed irreversibly. The whisper has grown bolder, sharper, as if curious and hungry, observing the effects of his untrained power. A realization settles deep within him. The encounter was not merely a test of skill or courage. It was a reckoning, and he may have passed, but at a cost he cannot yet measure. For the first time, he senses the truth he has been avoiding: surviving as a Grey Knight is not enough. To endure, he must embrace what he is becoming, and confront not only the demons of the universe but the darkness growing quietly inside him. The war has begun, and the first taste of its terror is a reminder that victory will always demand sacrifice, and that the next encounter may not allow him the mercy of chance. The cost of survival is heavier than any armor. Every psychic expenditure, every ritualized sacrifice, every moment of suppressing fear and doubt is etched into his being. The initiate knows that what he has faced here is only a fragment of the endless war that defines their existence. The demon was but the opening act of an unending theater of horror, a reminder that the true enemy is as eternal as it is merciless. And still, he cannot ignore the whisper within him, pulsing with curiosity and quiet hunger, reminding him that his soul is not wholly his own, and may never be again. He glances at his brothers, understanding something essential: strength alone cannot carry them through what lies ahead. Survival depends on discipline, unity, and the relentless suppression of doubt. And yet, deep within, a spark flickers, a faint reminder that beneath the hollowing, beneath the rituals, beneath the terror, there remains a trace of something human. Perhaps it is hope, or perhaps it is merely recognition of the life once lived. Either way, it is fragile, delicate, and precious, yet it must endure, for the warp does not forgive, and the universe does not pause for mercy. As the squad consolidates, preparing to continue their march across the desolate world, the initiate knows one undeniable truth: the cost of victory is eternal vigilance. Each battle won will carve new scars into mind and soul, each demonic encounter will push him closer to the edge, and every whisper within him is both a warning and a promise. Victory is not a celebration. It is an acknowledgement of survival in the face of annihilation, and a commitment to endure the horrors that lie beyond. The path of a Grey Knight is a journey without end, a war without respite, and a life that demands the ultimate price, the self. And yet, even as the darkness stretches outward, even as the whisper grows louder, even as the knowledge of unending conflict presses down, he steps forward. Step by step, he walks the edge of the abyss, armored in silver, sharpened by ritual, and hollowed by sacrifice. Each stride is both defiance and submission, each breath a testament to endurance, each heartbeat a quiet,